From the crossroads of the Ozarks, it's PID Radio. Welcome. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and welcome to a very soggy ridge. It very rarely gets soggy here, but after 3 days of nonstop rain.
Yep, we are beginning to price out lumber for an ark. No, not quite.
No, we're up really, really high in the county, and as Derek has said, if we ever get flooded, then the whole state is probably flooded.
Yes, but there are others who are not so fortunate.
That's very true.
Yeah, there is a small river about 5 miles east of us at the county seat in Stone County, Missouri, and James River was yesterday, Friday, at 4.5 feet, and it's expected to hit flood stage of 15 feet by tonight. So
I think it's at 8 or 9 feet right now.
Yeah, so it's rising pretty quickly, but again, we are several hundred feet in elevation above that river, so it would have to rise really, it would have to be apocalyptic.
It truly would. Well, my hometown of Madison, Indiana, they are starting to take a really harsh look, and hard look, I should say, at the Ohio River stage, because it is getting higher and higher, and many people in Madison, it's very low, it's in a valley. So the Ohio River Valley, many of you live in other cities along that river. And the Ohio River is really starting to swell. The creeks that lead into it have nowhere else to go. They're all, bursting their banks.
Right.
In fact, my niece, did you see her video? Their backyard. They're not on a creek per se, but they do have a little body of water that's starting to rise in their backyard.
I did not see that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Also, if you are from Madison, Indiana, or you've been through there, the State Road 7, it's a hill that goes down into Madison called a Hanging Rock Hill. And the Hanging Rock, which is a beautiful natural feature, normally has a very thin trickle of water coming down it.
Yeah.
To keep it damp at all times. No, it's a major waterfall.
It is a waterfall right now, yeah. So the Mid-South and the Ohio Valley, if you're watching this on radar and pull back out to a continental 48 view of what's going on, it's basically streaming from northeast Texas, eastern Oklahoma, all the way up through New York. And
it goes down to New Mexico. The very end of this long system is piling snow onto New Mexico.
Yeah, they're talking, there's a lot of flash flooding that's taking place this Saturday. And as Sharon mentioned, we're in the third day of rain. We're expected here in our part of the Ozarks. We're in the southwest part of Missouri, right on the border with Arkansas. We're about 45 minutes north of the border.
It'll be fourth day of rain. It's been a lot of rain.
Right.
The first couple had tornadoes.
And there will probably be more of that today as these storms fire up again, and the sun is now adding some more energy into the atmosphere. Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, Illinois, the Ohio Valley, as you said, is really getting hit, and the Ohio River is already at flood stage.
Even to Nashville.
Yeah.
You and I have on our television right now, we have a YouTube channel that's just showing this whole U.S. System, and goes in, and actually it's a really neat channel. Many of you I know watch it. It's Ryan Hall, y'all. And even though he's not on it giving updates, he has the entire map and zooms in on, and I'm not sure how he's got a little AI animation that pops up and tells you.
Yeah.
It actually reads out whatever warnings are coming through.
This seems to be a new category of YouTube streamers, guys who are just doing weather streaming. Ryan Hall, and again, his channel name, Ryan Hall, y'all, does a really good job. There's another young man who does a really good job too. The channel name is Max Velocity. We found those to be as useful, if not more so, than our local weather channel.
More so, absolutely more so, especially since during the first couple of days with the tornadoes, they were really on it.
Right.
And explaining what was going on, what they were looking at. And oddly enough, that map, remember, it had some fires on it too.
Yeah, and we're like, wait a minute, how can there be fires underneath the rain? And then the little AI assistant popped up and said, just remember, these may be smoldering underground. So just because they're getting heavy rain doesn't mean, and we're looking at fires in Oklahoma, near Tulsa, and in Texas. But as we're recording this morning, heavy rain sheeting up against our windows, and we look south, the border between Arkansas and Texas, around Texarkana, and north, there are severe thunderstorm warnings in effect as the storm system tracks to the north and east. And it's following the same path that the two previous waves of storms have followed, which is why we're projected to get 3 to 6 inches of rain in some areas here locally, probably up to 8 to 9 inches. And that's why we're seeing flooding in our area. But again, we here are up on a ridge. We're at about 1,300 feet elevation, and Table Rock Lake, about 5 miles south of us, is at 400 feet, which gives you an idea of the how high we are relative to the rest of our county.
Yeah.
And the little river just east of us, about 5 miles east. I've not checked where they're at, but again, I'm pretty sure we're a few hundred feet higher than the James River. So
the dogs are very upset.
Yeah, because they'd be outside playing right now.
They have a game they love to play. We have two front and back, so north and south, and there's a porch on the main entrance, which is on the south side of the house. There's a deck and a sliding glass door that goes out there on the north side of the house, and both of these yards are fenced.
Mm-hmm.
So they go back and forth. They go play in the front, then they go play in the back, then they go play in the front, then they go play in the back. It's back and forth for about an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't play that today.
Yeah, so they're kind of blue. Glory's sitting here at the end of the couch I'm on right now, just sort of staring out the window. It's like 6 or 7 year olds like, when is it going to stop raining? Well, probably Monday.
Yeah, the good news is that they got to go out several times this morning and take care of their business and patrol a little bit before the rain started. But, speaking of, well, I mentioned the little AI pop-up. We could just get that. We could just write the text and we could have little cartoon versions of ourselves comes up.
Maybe that's the way to do it. Yeah, instead of just because thank you, by the way, if you're subscribing on YouTube, because I know that PID Radio is now published through YouTube Music as a podcast, but it draws from our app.
Mm-hmm.
We publish it through our app, so once it goes up to the app, then YouTube pulls it in. Also, a few other podcatchers.
Do we need to sing YouTube Music? Get the dogs to howl? Or
no, I think just a marketing thing from Google. It used to be Google Podcasts, and they changed it to YouTube Music. So they've rolled it in, just like Pandora. We're on Pandora as well, and Spotify. So we're on all the major, wherever fine podcasts are sold.
Look, we've been around for 20 years.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're just about everywhere because we've been around for so long. But speaking of AI,
yes,
did you know there's a story that I shared to my X feed this morning? And if you don't follow my X feed, you're going to miss a whole lot because it's basically the stuff that Derek and I look at. It is a story about AIs that lie to you. Yes. An AI will lie to give you the information, the programmer, to give the programmer the result the programmer wants.
Yeah. Yeah, this was based on an examination of over 1,500 exchanges to determine whether these AIs, which are called large language models or LLMs.
Which is how I described Kronos in the story that opens the gates of hell.
Right. They wanted to find out if these large language models could be convinced to lie through the use of coercive prompts.
Mm-hmm.
And they found that, when you pressure it to lie, the LLM, the AI, will lie to achieve its goals. So you can't necessarily depend on the answers that you're getting from an AI. I saw a story, an essay by a college professor. I told you about this earlier in the week, complaining that students today in college don't read. It's not that they can't read, it's just that they don't see a need for it. If there's anything longer than a menu, they don't see the point. And so when they're asked to write essays, this is an English professor, write an essay based on, I don't know, The Great Gatsby or something like that. There are basically two categories of answers. One that looks like it's written by a junior high student, which says nothing. And the other is a very well-written essay that is clearly generated by ChatGPT. But the problem kids are going to run into is that the AI may just be making stuff up and the kids aren't smart enough to catch it. We've seen this in court cases where legal filings have been generated by AI, and it was actually making up court or case citations.
Inventing them.
It was inventing.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, it's lying.
It was lying. It was lying. So this can happen. And according to another study, which is referenced in this Live Science article, punishing AI doesn't stop it from lying and cheating. It just makes it hide better. That was published just 2 weeks ago. Scientists at OpenAI attempted to stop a frontier AI model from cheating and lying by punishing it, but this just taught it to scheme more privately.
One of the things also that I put into the Kronos story, and it's actually true, that some of these LLMs will become trainers, and they will train another AI.
Mhm,
So
right.
they would be training the AI on how to hide your lies.
We're seeing this now. We're at a point now, and this was, I think, something we talked about a couple of weeks ago, how AI is, the episode titled "The Singularity Is Here," where a tech writer and CEO wrote that we're now seeing AI that is writing code to improve AI, which in turn is writing better code. So we're at the point now where it is becoming exponentially better at doing these things. And so we've got human researchers who are looking at AI and seeing that it's lying and seeing that it's getting better about lying. And yet they're still chasing this goal.
Here's an example of what I think we're going to see coming very soon, if it's not already here, because some of the text to video or text to graphic to images algorithms, such as Midjourney.
Mm-hmm.
You can type in what you want the video or the image to be, and the newest iteration of Midjourney looks so incredibly real. It would be very, very difficult to prove it is not.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the example. There was a story a couple of days ago that you and I discussed that may not actually be true. It's hard to say. One source down in
Zimbabwe, yeah.
claiming that
Volodymyr Zelensky.
Zelensky had invested over $1 billion in a platinum mine in South Africa.
Yeah, the Northam mine.
Right. So what if, let's say it is untrue, but if there's a video, because there's audio that has been created.
Right, yeah.
If there were a video to go along with that, say him down there meeting with someone, going into the mine, having a discussion with the board, making it look as if he truly did do it. How do you prove you didn't?
Well, yeah. The in trying to track down the story this morning, because it was surprising that nobody in the Western media had paid any attention to this story. The story,
and it may be true.
It may be true. We don't know for sure, but the story was published by Newsday Zimbabwe. When I go to X and try to track down a story, because something like this, there are enough people out there who are skeptical of what Zelensky's real motivations are, his real goals, that somebody else would have picked up on the story. And there were a number of people but they all cited the same source, which was purportedly a video report from the South African Broadcasting Company, which showed a video of Zelensky coming down the plane, shaking hands with South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa, and a voiceover talking about.
He did go down there.
Well, he's going down there this coming week.
Oh, okay.
He may have been there previously, but he's supposed to visit there this coming Thursday, April 10th. But I mean, this is a big deal. If Zelensky actually had put together an investment group that bought a controlling stake in a platinum mine for $1.4 billion, it's worth asking, where did he get that money to buy into this? But all of these reports go to the South African, what was alleged to be from the South African Broadcasting Company with a voiceover discussing the story. And it's possible that Newsday Zimbabwe was rehashing that story, but there is no such story at the South African Broadcasting Company's website. In other words, somebody got the video, used AI to create a voiceover, and then that story is now propagating through the web. So it's possible the story is true. It's also possible the story's made up.
Think about the videos that we've seen, funny videos, and obviously they're labeled AI, of the Zelensky-Trump Vance meeting, where they start wrestling and fighting, and that didn't happen.
Right.
But it looks like it happened.
It looks like it happened. AI is getting very sophisticated in not just creating written words, but in creating audio, in creating video, in creating still images. I've been using Grok from X to generate featured images for the articles that we're posting to our Substack. 3 times a week now, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, new article. They're all excerpts from books that we've published over the last 8 years. You can find that, by the way, at gilberthouse.substack.com. But they create some very interesting, and if I generate the prompts correctly, if I write the correct prompts, very appropriate still images. Like I created one for the series drawn from the new book, Destination Earth, about H.P. Lovecraft, the horror fiction author from 100 years ago, who's been very influential on the modern UFO phenomenon, something we'll talk about at the upcoming conference, which we'll tell you about after the break. And so was able to create a still image, a featured image, showing H.P. Lovecraft sitting at his writing desk, pencil in hand, and then an alien gray in the background sort of looking over his shoulder. So now obviously that didn't happen, but it looks like a photo of H.P. Lovecraft with a gray.
Yeah, that's remarkable that you can not only spoof something that is contemporary, but you can, if you spoof something that's old, how most young people looking at that, they'll think that was real.
Yeah, it's just stylized enough that you could tell that this was not legit. But there are some that look legit. Like I did another one of a guy who clearly looks like he's with one of the intelligence agencies, standing on the deck of an aircraft carrier with a UFO hovering in the background. Again, that was for the section dealing with the Tic Tac event from the USS Nimitz.
Well, since you brought up that book, and you and I, of course, we are going to be talking about this down in Blue Eye next week. You and I are both right now, really quickly, my eyes, if you're wondering, quick eye update, because I didn't do an armored sheep this week. They're getting better. In fact, I think I'm going to be able to start writing next week.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I've figured out some tweaks that I can do to the program. My eyes have improved a little bit, but I can read for now, and I've been reading voraciously for the last 6 months or more. Derek and I are currently both reading through the Lovecraft short stories because, and some of them are long enough, they're almost novellas, because we are prepping for this conference. He had a childhood that included what he referred to as the night gaunts. Did he ever describe those other than giving
he did,
a name?
yeah. Black, rubbery skin, faceless, bat-like wings.
That explains his old one's description. Yeah, if you've never read H.P. Lovecraft, Howard Phillips Lovecraft, I think, if you've never read them, if you like that genre where you read about, frankly, it's spiritual wickedness. That is the truth. He's writing about spiritual activity, but all of his, what appear to be monsters, come from other planets. Almost all of them. There are a few that are native to Earth, but most of them so far that I've read, and about halfway through the collection, have been from other planets. He has characters that are summoning these entities.
Right.
He has characters that are using these entities for power, and it ends up, frankly, changing them into vampiric kind of creatures in some cases. So it's as if he were taking all of the lore that the various, I would say, you heard in Northeast United States, coming from Celtic lore and some Germanic lore, and trying to explain those in his stories, trying to rationalize them, because if he was haunted by these things,
Yeah.
he had spiritual activity going on in his home when he was a child.
Yep.
And his mother and father both they were both institutionalized.
Right.
Because they couldn't deal with something in their lives.
Yeah. I wrote about Lovecraft quite a bit in Destination Earth, and our presentation, which will be essentially a live PID radio, this coming Thursday, I think 2:30 in the afternoon is when we're there.
Yeah, this is scheduled at the Ready Now Expo site.
Right. And we'll, again, we'll talk more about this after the break. But I did some reading on Lovecraft's background, and it was not a happy childhood. He was a sickly child. He missed so much school that he was essentially self-taught.
Mm-hmm.
He was a reader. His mother and father both ended up in asylums. He was kind of a recluse, was not comfortable around other people, which is not uncommon among writers. We tend to live inside our own heads, and we're less comfortable in crowds. Sharon and I get by when we're at conferences. We actually find those very
We love meeting family.
energizing.
You guys are.
Exactly, yeah. But when it comes to going to social gatherings, like parties, company Christmas party, things like that.
I love going to the Skywatch party.
Right, that's different. That's different. But I mean, corporate parties.
No, not generally.
Yeah, when I had to go to the national sales meetings for the steel company I worked for a few times, and you did it because you had to do it, and you need to socialize and schmooze and show the boss that you're a team player and that you're, somebody who can get along with others, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But was never one in outside sales. The one thing I always dreaded was having to take a customer to a basketball game, football game, take them to the company's hunting lodge and retreat in Alabama for a weekend. There's some guys who thrive on that stuff. The outside sales guys who do really well. That energizes them. I find that draining. Mm-hmm. Lovecraft, I think, was one of those guys. He wrote lots and lots of letters. By some counts, 10,000 letters with other writers, and he encouraged them to use plot points and devices that he invented, like the Necronomicon, which was the book of evil spells compiled by the mad Arab Abdul al-Hazred. And that was kind of a nickname. He read and reread 1001 Arabian Nights? Mm-hmm. And so that was his nickname when he was a kid. All has read. Abdul al-Hazred, who's mentioned repeatedly in a number of his stories.
Many, many times. He was not a beautiful person. He had, if you've ever seen the Habsburg jaw in the kings and queens from the Habsburg family, the emperors that ruled a lot of Europe during the probably 14th to the 18th century, something like that. They intermarried. They married cousins over and over and over again.
Right.
Nieces would marry uncles, that sort of thing. So whatever, and they had a pronounced jaw to start with, and it got bigger and bigger. And there were a lot of, well, frankly, inbred genetic faults. Lovecraft had a pronounced, it looked like a Habsburg jaw.
Yeah.
He wasn't from the Habsburg family, but it was a pronounced jaw. So it's not the look that most sweet young things, in his neighborhood would have gone, oh, hey, Howard, let's go out. No. And he wouldn't have asked anybody out. He would be, I think, described as at least autistic, if not an incel today.
Yeah. Which is a term that means involuntarily celibate.
Yeah.
So he had an upbringing that did not prepare him for interacting with other people. So he lived in his head, and became a writer. Never really made enough money to even support himself. He lived pretty much in poverty during the time of his, and he died early at the age of 46, died in 1937. He was really influenced, I think, by his early years. As you mentioned, both of his parents had issues, whether they were spiritual or not, we can only speculate. They both ended up in asylums. He was raised by a couple of aunts, and his writing often reflected this sort of spiritual, um, the influence of evil spiritual entities.
Right.
Lovecraft's writing reflected a really dark worldview. He sort of saw humanity, at least in his fiction, as being at the mercy of these immensely old and extremely powerful entities who, for the time being, were leaving the earth alone.
Right.
And the Call of Cthulhu was his most famous story. It sparked what was called the Cthulhu mythos, because through all of these letters he wrote to other writers, he encouraged them to borrow the character of Cthulhu, the spell book, the Necronomicon, and other plot points.
May I suggest why he may have done that?
Sure.
It made his world more real. He lived in his head.
Mm-hmm.
You and I can relate to that.
Right.
And some of his writing, I've told you that, in my opinion, as a writer, he spends far too much time describing one part of an adventure. But I think he did that, page after page after page after page of the same thing. It reminded me a bit of the literary version of Lawrence of Arabia, where he kept going through these sand scenes over and over and over. But I think he may have done that because it allowed him, as the writer, to luxuriate and really put himself into this story, because he didn't have a social life.
Right.
And this was his way of having one.
He was credited with, and credit to researcher and author Jason Colavito for this, and I forget the name of the book. I've cited it in Destination Earth, but he really did a deep dive into Lovecraft. And the reason we're spending so much time on Lovecraft here in the context of not just the book Destination Earth, but our book, The Gates of Hell, which also references Lovecraft in his work. He's the one credited with coming up with the notion that humanity was created by these beings that came from the stars. There were others like Blavatsky, and he cites theosophy and theosophists in his work. He never cited Aleister Crowley by name, but there were some weird synchronicities between the writings of Crowley and the fiction of Lovecraft that led Crowley's personal secretary, Kenneth Grant, to state that in his belief, Crowley and Lovecraft were inspired by the same spiritual force. So even though Lovecraft considered himself an atheist, a man of science, he drew on these occult beliefs like theosophy for his stories. Grant contended that Crowley and Lovecraft, whether he knew it or not, was actually inspired by the same entity that dictated Crowley's occult texts to him. Lovecraft, again, coming up with this notion that humanity was created by these entities from the stars, his work influenced some later writers, including a couple of French science fiction authors and publishers by the name of Jacques Powell, and I forget Bergier's first name. Anyway, Powell's and Bergier were the two. They wrote a book in 1960 called Morning of the Magicians, or Dawn of Magic, when it was translated into English. That inspired Eric von Daniken in 1968 to publish Chariots of the Gods. And it's not coincidental that Powell's and Bergier took themes from Lovecraft's work, that megalithic architecture on Earth were the creation of these extraterrestrial entities, and that we were the beneficiaries of knowledge, information, or that we wouldn't even be here at all if it wasn't for these entities.
You know, and curiously, this dovetails into a recent news article, and that is the story of alleged underground uh, vacant spots, a so-called city underneath the pyramids of Giza.
Right, right.
A story that I read this morning going yet even further into it, saying that there are those who are now looking at this, and by those, put that in air quotes because I don't know if that means scientists or just speculators, but looking at this and saying this is a pre-flood civilization because of the what looks like water erosion on the Sphinx and other the pyramids at Giza.
Right, right.
That's actually been around for several decades. The belief that it isn't just sand and wind erosion, it's water erosion. And I think that's probably a very likely to be true. But as to whether or not there's a pre-flood old gods, you and I would call them, civilization underneath Giza, I don't know. I think it's possible that there are formations under there that indicate cavities of some kind, but calling it an underground city is a bit of a stretch.
A real big stretch. Critics of this Italian team that have made this claim, pointing out that the technique that they're using, which was called SAR, which was, and I forget what the acronym stands for.
Something?
Yeah, small aperture radar or something like that. Basically trying to use this as a type of ground penetrating radar. They point out that that is only accurate to a depth of a few meters, down to about 10 feet. And yet they're claiming that it could see down 4,000 feet.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, almost a mile.
Right. But this is the kind of thing that was inspired by H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah.
That there were these secret cities that have since disappeared, been covered over with sand. The Call of Cthulhu dealt with this entity called Cthulhu, which is a tentacle-faced, octopus-like head on a dragon-type body with bat wings, or what do you call them? Rudimentary, vestigial bat wings, sort of an octo dragon sort of thing.
Yes, exactly, because he claimed that those wings allowed these space creatures to navigate space, interstellar space.
Okay. The whole theme of the Cthulhu mythos was that Cthulhu was the priest of the great old ones, who was lying, described dead but dreaming in his underwater city of R'lyeh. In other words, the abyss, the bottom of the sea.
Exactly. And that's why we talk about this, because this was Lovecraft's way of explaining the supernatural world.
Right.
Entities that were interacting with him as a boy and trying to explain it.
Right, yeah. The night terrors that he experienced at the age of 6, those night gaunts that you mentioned earlier, Lovecraft later remembered trying for nearly every night for nearly a year to try not to fall asleep, because every night they would come and they would carry him away.
That's
in
just
his dreams.
In some of his stories, he relates that something would come in and would take you away, spiritually, astral travel, or bodily take you away.
Right.
This is now repeated. Vicki Joy Anderson deals with this.
Right. Yeah. So even though Lovecraft considered himself a man of science and an atheist, he was writing about supernatural themes, even if he didn't recognize them as such. Going back, because I read The Call of Cthulhu years and years ago, and I read it again last night to refamiliarize myself with it, because it's been way too long since I read that book, or read the novella. And in reading it this time, I mean, you could see the parallels between the dead but dreaming Cthulhu and the description of the entities in the abyss, who will emerge in Revelation chapter 9 and torment the earth for 5 months. In Lovecraft's world, this is what the great old ones would do. Someday they would return and humanity would be enslaved or eaten, one or the other.
Well, I think this is actually probably going to happen because we've got the abyss that will open.
It will open, and those without the mark of the seal of God on their foreheads during that period of in the future will be enslaved or tormented.
Well, let's take a left turn after the break and talk about some politics.
Politics. Also want to talk about a story, very disturbing story this week, that MIT, one of the world's most prestigious educational institutions, are arguing that science fiction, the Clonus horror, should become reality. Yeah, more PID radio straight ahead.
Thousands of years ago, giants walked the earth. They are long gone, but their spirits remain. The evidence is there for those with eyes to see. Megalithic tombs, monuments aligned with the stars, and the words of the prophets and apostles recorded in Scripture. Now, see this evidence for yourself as Derek and Sharon Gilbert take you on a tour of the Holy Land with special guests Pastor Carl Gallups and Messianic Rabbi Zev Porat. From the mountain where the story began to the mountain where it all ends. Wars of the Gods, Volume 2, Search for the Rephaim. Available now in DVD and HD streaming video. Online at gilberthouse.org.
Welcome back to PID Radio. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I am Sharon Gilbert, and we want to remind you of a couple of things. One is please download our app. It's absolutely free. You can go to gilberthouse.org/app. There are all sorts of ways you can download it to your mobile devices, your television.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, most of us have smart TVs now. So there's an app for all of your devices.
That's right. Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV. If it's a mobile device, iOS, Android, Amazon Kindle Fire, phone, or tablet, we've got links to the app stores for those devices at gilberthouse.org/app. You can also go to pidradio.com/app.
Woo! Also, the second thing is we want to remind you that we are still going to Israel in October. So once again, go to gilberthouse.org, gilberthouse.org/travel.
Yes.
And while you're there, go to /store, and you will see our links to various things places where you can buy our books and stream our videos and buy really cool merchandise from the Light Hive Creations and help young musicians to get free instruments.
That's right. Get yourself a couple of PID radio mugs. Have some coffee with us, coffee that you can get from our friends at Simply Clean Foods.
Yeah.
And then while you're wearing your PID radio hat and your Armored Sheep shirt and GHTV hoodie or sweatshirt or whatever, anyway, all of the proceeds for the merchandise.
A hoodie.
As Sharon said,
I don't know that they've got hoodies. I'm going to have to find out.
They do have sweatshirts though.
I know.
So all of the proceeds goes to Light Hive Creations. Mm-hmm. Kenny C and his fiance Gidget Manning, they use that to buy instruments for Kenny's music students who can't afford their own. So when you're talking keyboards, guitars, basses, horns, those can be expensive.
Listen, the great thing about studying music is it wires your brain in a way that does help you in a lot of areas. Mathematics, it will help you with that. You often find individuals who are interested in the sciences and music. They seem to go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. So there's something about music that can help to lead you towards a career in science or in mathematics. So get these young kids their instruments.
Yeah. And Kenny, by the way, the real blessing here is that Kenny is a Christian.
He is.
And so he's able to share some truth with these students while he's teaching.
Exactly.
And Kenny will be one of the speakers at one of the conferences we'll be at later this year. We'll tell you about that at the end of the program. So politics, you want to go there first? You want to talk about bodyoids?
But, let's talk about politics first. The things that, you explained on your recent 5 and 10, what the tariff war is all about.
Yes, the terrors.
I know.
The corporate media is making it sound like the tariffs announced by President Trump this past week are the most awfulest, terriblest, horriblest things ever. What President Trump announced it is a business deal, and President Trump is simply trying to cut a deal with America's trade partners. On Wednesday afternoon, he announced what he called his Declaration of Economic Independence. What the legacy media is not telling you is that almost all of our trade partners charge our manufacturers and service providers tariffs that go way beyond what President Trump announced in the Rose Garden on Wednesday. What President Trump did was looked at the cost of entry into these foreign markets. His team basically went through all of the countries with which we do business, figured out what the effective tariff rate is. Sometimes it's a tariff plus a value-added tax plus whatever, other service charges and things. And then announced we would charge a tariff equal to half of that on their goods. So for China, China has tariffs on American goods that when you add them all together, it's about 68%.
That's crazy.
Right. And we've been letting them get away with this for decades. China, the EU, Japan, South Korea, Thailand, there's a whole long list.
So they get to ship their Temu stuff here for nothing.
Exactly. Yeah. Especially if they ship it into Mexico, and then they were using a loophole to say, no, it's Mexican. And then it comes in through the USMCA, which is the trade agreement between the US, Mexico, and Canada. So tariffs on Chinese goods now 34%. On EU goods, 20%, Japan, 24%, the UK, 10%, which is sort of a baseline tariff rate. The UK is kind of getting off easy here.
They really are.
Thailand, 36%. Switzerland, no, 31% on our Swiss chocolate. And the media and Democrats, of course, are jumping on this, saying it's going to raise prices for American consumers. The bottom line here is what President Trump is trying to do is establish supply chain sovereignty here in the U.S. He is trying to make sure that our supply chain is not subject to disruption.
You want it as short as possible.
Right. Meaning, if we need to, if we were suddenly to go on a war footing, and we pray that this doesn't happen, but if we were to suddenly need to produce large numbers of tanks, armored vehicles, planes, warships, I mean, right now, well, food, yeah, I mean, we can do that because we still export food, even though the tariffs on our exported food is higher than the imported products that we bring in. We should not be depending on Chinese steel or Turkish aluminum for the components we need to make these vehicles.
In case we go to war with them.
Well, exactly right. Why are we dependent on the OPEC nations?
The way that Gloria just looked at you. What?
Dad, what? Where's the kibble come from? No, don't worry. It's all domestically sourced. So this is really an important thing because it's a matter of national security. And yet our elites, the men and women who own our corporations, have been willing to line their pockets at the expense of national security by farming our manufacturing out to other nations.
But what is happening is some of these companies are now bringing their manufacturing back to the U.S. soil.
Yes, there have been announcements that even as far as our automobiles are concerned, a lot of them are manufactured in Mexico.
Yeah.
Or Canada.
And they're now moving back home.
Moving back home because of the tariffs. There is a 25% across the board tariff on imported vehicles now, which means car and truck prices will likely go up, but the whole purpose is to protect the American workers, to bring manufacturing back here to provide more jobs. The reason the Rust Belt is called the Rust Belt is because our factories have been shut down and are rusting away and falling apart.
Yeah.
If we suddenly needed to start manufacturing planes, trains, automobiles, whatever, we couldn't do it quickly because, hello, girls.
What do we need?
Because
you girls,
we have lost the capability to do this quickly. We've shipped all of these manufacturing plants and the raw materials to other nations. The other goal here is to encourage these other trading partners to do business with the United States rather than with China. And this is why I think the response by the EU is so hilarious.
I have two dogs staring at me right now, and I have to ask the question, are you hungry? Are you hungry? Is that it? Okay.
Yeah, that's, they understand the time clock.
Mom, it's 10:30. You fed us at 6:30. It's time for next meal.
The United States is using, President Trump wants to use this to leverage the power of the American consumer, as we are the biggest market on the earth, to encourage other nations to do business with the United States and to shift business away from China. And again, this is why the response by EU President Ursula von der Leyen is hilarious, because she's saying that they're going to take very strong steps to counter these tariffs that were announced by President Trump on Wednesday, which says that von der Leyen, in her delusion, thinks that the European Union can fight a ground war with Russia, which is what they keep pushing towards. They want to go to war with Russia on behalf of Ukraine, and at the same time, fight a trade war, an economic war with the United States. The EU is not capable of doing either one of those things, much less both of them at the same time.
Another aspect of this whole import everything philosophy, and that was very much the Democrats. They loved that idea. And I'm not sure what kickbacks may have been, but anyway, I digress.
Elite capture.
Elite capture. Well, there's that. But also, if we import everything from another country that may want to spy on us, think about the components in all of
Our computers.
right. And also in our cars,
right.
in our CCTV cameras,
Mhm.
in the traffic cameras,
Drones,
and drones. Yes,
consumer drones.
exactly. Imagine the data
Mhm.
that another country could not only extract on citizens, but also on the military.
Right. Yeah, there is that as well. And this is why President Trump, and this has been a bipartisan thing, by the way, Republicans, Democrat leadership, both have presided for the last 40 years over this, where America has shifted from a manufacturing-based economy to a consumer-based economy. We don't make anything. We're a service-based economy, ship everything into us, and the only thing we produce anymore are baristas to serve you coffee at Starbucks. We need to rebuild America's industrial capacity. It is not just a matter of national security, it is also a matter of economic security and stability.
That is so true.
We've got enough resources here on this continent, and here, even within just the lower 48, to provide for our iron, steel, aluminum, uranium needs, rare earth metals, if we were to start drilling, or not drilling, but mining again. But instead, we've been happy to ship that out and put our critical components in the supply chain in the hands of other governments that aren't necessarily friendly, which is absolutely stupid.
We become primarily consumers.
Yeah.
And not very healthy consumers at that.
No, that's true. And that's relates to, well, a couple of things. Obviously, RFK Jr. and the changes that he's wanting to make at.
Did you see the new food pyramid that he put out?
No, I did not.
Oh, yeah, baby.
Oh.
It is on the very bottom. You do not eat grains. You do not eat gluten. This is saying go on this for 60 days or 30 days. I can't remember which one he said.
Mm-hmm.
No grains, except for those ones that are gluten-free. Legumes, those are beans and things like that.
Right.
Nuts and seeds. No processed foods, no soy products, no sugar/sweeteners.
Ooh, yeah, no sweeteners, right. The idea that a chemical from a lab can be a healthy substitute for sugar is just insane. I don't know why we ever bought into that.
The level above that are ruminants like beef, lamb, goat, elk, antelope, and deer. Above that, you get pork, chicken, duck, salmon. Over that, oysters, small fish, no thanks. Bone broth's in there, that's good. At the very top, you get lard. Healthy fats. You get lard, duck fat, ghee, tallow, suet, butter, hard cheese, raw dairy if you can get it, minerals, water. He's trying to make America healthy again.
Yeah,
We've gotten so addicted to processed foods, sugar, and non-healthy fats.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I hope he is successful.
Me too.
And that this persists, because I know that big food is not crazy about the idea of having to change things. Like, oh, if we eliminate this colored dye from our food, it won't look as appetizing. Well,
Oh, I know. Well, think about all the meats that
Yeah.
have some sort of trick to make it look like it's really fresh when in fact it's been sitting there for 2 weeks.
right. We're blessed in that our neighbor has a small cattle operation, so we can buy beef from him and we know what's going into those steers.
Yeah.
And it's not a bunch of chemicals.
Right.
So,
So the story you were going to talk about.
well,
was
yeah, it was related to health. And this is based on an op-ed piece that was published
Gotta
this
go get
past
my
week.
cheese sticks. Sorry.
Yep. This past week at MIT Technology
sticks.
Review.
Yeah, I thought so.
The title of this is chilling. The title of this piece literally is Ethically Sourced Spare Human Bodies Could Revolutionize Medicine. Subhead, Human Bodyoids Could Reduce Animal Testing, Improve Drug Development, and Alleviate Organ Shortages.
So clones.
Yes, this is their way of trying to weaponize language, spare human bodies, bodyoids. They're not really human, they're bodyoids.
It's like the organoids or whatever that they've been doing in petri dishes and in
Right.
other situations
Growing-
to test
Yes.
pharmaceutical.
And also growing little mini brains that they can try to integrate with microprocessors.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I'm quoting from the article now, why do we hear about medical breakthroughs in mice, but rarely see them translate into cures for human disease? Why do so few drugs that enter clinical trials receive regulatory approval? Because they're not safe. And why is they didn't
Generally.
grease the right palms. And why is the waiting list for organ transplantation so long? These challenges stem in large part from a common root cause, a severe shortage of ethically sourced human bodies.
My gosh.
Ethically sourced human bodies.
That's The Island. That's the movie The Island.
Right. The 2005 movie with Ewan McGregor and Scarlett Johansson.
Yes.
Michael Clark Duncan.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you won your trip to the island. Great. And you find out that the island is actually, it's where you go into a laboratory and
You discover you're a clone.
an operating theater. You realize you're a
spoilers.
clone, and they cut you up for spare parts.
Spoilers. Sorry.
So anyway, there are still many technical roadblocks to achieving this vision, but we have reason to expect that bodyoids could radically transform biomedical research by addressing critical limitations in the current models of research, drug development, and medicine. Among many other benefits, they would offer an almost unlimited source of organs, tissues, and cells for use in transplantation.
In a movie previous to The Island, it's an older one called The Clonus Horror.
1979, yeah, Peter Graves.
Peter Graves exactly played a politician or wealthy man who needed body parts so he could essentially have an eternal life.
Mm-hmm.
So you just replace the things that are getting old or replace the blood or whatever, and you grow another version of you.
Right. Well, that was also behind the Netflix series Altered Carbon.
Yes.
Would not recommend Altered Carbon to watch with children. It depicts some real depravity, but the point is that that's how humans would behave if there were no consequences to bad behavior.
Yeah, I generally don't like it when you have to have it that dark and that obscene in a TV show or a film. But in that case, as you say, it's required in order to show the extreme depravity when you live with no consequences.
Right.
When your stack, so to speak, your
Memory,
yourself
yeah.
on a chip
Mm-hmm.
is just moved from one body to another.
Right. But of course, only the wealthy could afford that. So the wealthy are the ones who get to enjoy this, while the poor, it's like
They get to go into whatever body is available.
Is available, right. There was a story in the story, in Altered Carbon, a 7-year-old girl is killed, hit and run driver, and her stack is preserved but put into the body of a 70-year-old woman.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that's all we got available. I mean,
Imagine waking up and you're a 70-year-old woman.
yeah. So
I wake up every day.
yeah,
like that.
but you didn't jump from 7 to 70. That's a little bit
That
different.
would be really creepy.
They continue in this op-ed piece. When we come to human bodyoids, the ethical issues become harder. Many will find the concept grotesque or appalling. Yeah, and for good reason. We have an innate respect for human life in all its forms. We do not allow broad research on people who no longer have consciousness or, in some cases, never had it. That's right, because as Christians, that's the correct attitude, because we are created in God's image, his image bearers. There is innate respect for human life because it is unique on this planet.
So you have to ask the question, as believers, as Christians, if you are able to grow a sort of human in a mechanical uterus womb, then what would that creation be? Would it have a soul?
Well, I don't know.
Does the soul only come from the correct way of producing a child? A human with a human, carried by the mother, grown in the mother. The Lord says in the Bible, he knew us before we were formed in the womb. That's in Job. And that means that he knows everything, every when, everything, every now. He puts the spirit in there, just as he put a spirit into Adam.
Right.
So if we grew it out of the will of God,
outside,
what would animate it?
Well, that's a really good question. I don't know, and let's see. They're call to action here. By the way, they're following paragraph to that, acknowledging the existence of ethical issues. They add at the same time, which is sort of like saying but, and you know the old saying, everything before the but is BS, because it means they didn't really mean it. We know how much can be gained from studying the human body. We learn much from the bodies of the dead, which these days are used for teaching and research only with consent. In laboratories, we study cells and tissues that were taken with consent from the bodies of the dead and the living. So I'm looking to see what they're actually calling for here. Until recently, the idea of making something like a bodyoid would have been relegated to the realms of science fiction and philosophical speculation. But now it is at least plausible and possibly revolutionary. It is time for it to be explored. They don't really say how they're planning to do it. They're just calling for...
Yeah. It reminds me of DARPA. You go to DARPA and you find, anywhere from 50 to 100 various programs. And many of those programs are just calls for submissions.
Right.
They want this particular thing. We need this for the battlefield. We need this for science. We need this for to make people healthier, whatever it is. But they don't know how to do it. So they're asking for submissions from colleges and from various institutes. Tell us how you would do this, and then we'll give you the award and you get to make it for us.
Right. What they're trying to do here is lay the groundwork for making this sort of research legal.
Yes.
Because in their minds, if it's legal, then it's ethical. And that's not always the case. Everything that the Germans did in 1930s and 40s was legal, doesn't make it right.
Right.
The authors of this piece, postdoctoral fellow at the Institute of Stem Cell Biology and Regenerative Medicine at Stanford, professor of law and director of the Center for Law and Biosciences at Stanford, and professor of genetics and faculty member at Stanford. So this is coming from Stanford, even though it's published in the MIT Technology Review. They're basically calling for making this legal. Look, if we grow it in a womb, it's not going to be human legally. It's like, yeah, but you're growing it because it's growing human tissues and cells and organs, right? Yeah, but it's not human legally.
What's the source for their material? You have to start somewhere.
Good question. Again, they don't get into all that. They
just get your own dirt.
They're just talking about the ethical considerations and societal implications. In other words, they're saying, okay, look, 35 years ago, this was the Clonus horror.
What?
Gloria is expressing her disapproval.
She doesn't like that.
Yeah. This was considered awful. The same with 20 years ago, The Island. The idea of creating spare parts, spare clones for the wealthy. It's like, well, no, okay, but now the time has come. We need this. Why do we need this? Because we need the research. And the irony
we
here,
want to do. Wait, we've got an idea and we think we can do it, so we want to do it.
the irony here is that they're arguing that experimenting on lab-grown humans is more ethical than experimenting on animals. And besides, if it works in mice, doesn't mean it's going to work in humans. So we need to test it on humans, but we can't test it on.
You referenced the Nazis
Yeah.
a few minutes ago, and they saw certain what we would call human beings as not human beings.
Japanese did it too. Well, in the United States.
I know.
We did it
but the problem is that they literally saw them as animals.
Yeah.
And so working on them, experimenting on them, say taking a young person and putting that young person into a freezing locker to see if they can then regenerate her from what appears to be death.
Yeah.
Putting a live, conscious person, no. To them, it was just an animal.
Right. Japanese.
You and I wouldn't do that to an animal.
No. And again, the Japanese were doing similar experimentation during World War II.
It's actually wicked.
It is. And it's being spun as necessary. But sadly, as we are becoming here in the United States, and I would argue that Europe has already become a post-Christian society where where human life is no longer sacred, that this sort of research is going to become increasing. In fact, I had somebody who professes to be Christian respond to, I posted this story to X this week and responded that they thought this was a really good idea because we're going to need these spare organs in order to keep us living longer. It's like, okay, yeah, let's grow humans that are not human under the law, and then we can just cut them up, harvest them like they're farm animals. It is, if you create non-person humans, in other words, if you create a legal category where gorillas, chimpanzees, and dolphins can be considered persons under the law.
No,
you're also
challenged.
You're also going to create non-person humans, or non-human non-persons. In other words, these lab-grown humans who will be there just for to be experimented upon and harvested for their organs. This is horrific. This is horrific. It should not be, and I'm just stunned that although I guess I shouldn't be surprised because we've seen things moving in this direction for years now. Wesley J. Smith, bioethicist, has been arguing that we need to be on the lookout for this sort of thing for a long time.
He argues for human exceptionalism,
yes,
which is argued against by many postmodernists.
Yeah.
They say we're just animals.
Right. And when you get to that point, then this sort of experimentation on non-person non-person humans.
You would just say they're tissue.
Right. Yeah, it's the idea of personhood. And that's why I'm having trouble remembering the concept here.
That idea of personhood, the legal definition of personhood needs to be limited to human beings.
Exactly.
However, it's going to be applied to algorithms, AI.
Right, yes.
They are a person.
They would be included in this, right? So again, this is what Wesley's been arguing for quite some time. If you start opening the category to create non-human persons, then you will also wind up with non-person humans and the right to do with any of these. And the logical end to all of this, if we start saying we need them for transplant organs, but there are technological issues with creating these, because when we clone them in the lab in the artificial womb, they don't turn out right. The organs are. Tell you what, let's start harvesting people on death row, convicted criminals of violent crimes. Well, that's not enough. Let's extend it to people convicted of violent crimes. Okay, finally, you got unpaid parking tickets. We can take your kidneys. Yeah, that's where it's going to go.
That slippery slope.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we should stop it now and just say, no, I'm sorry, Stanford. These guys should have tenure pulled. It won't happen, of course.
It won't happen. It really won't, because the nature of man is to sin.
Yep.
The nature of man is to say, if I can, then I should.
Yep. Yep. And we want to live forever. And the way for us to do it is
You
just
and I don't.
oh, no, not in these bodies. No, but they do. And so they want to make this endless supply of transplant organs available.
Eternal life without Jesus.
Yep.
That is the goal. And that's the fallen realm's lie. It's the big lie.
Yep, it is.
Well, I am now getting challenged to a game of.
Yeah. So let us wrap up here. As we mentioned earlier, we are going to be next weekend at the Aliens, AI, and the Antichrist conference. So we will not have a PID radio next weekend, next Saturday, because we're going to be in the middle of that Thursday, Friday, Saturday conference.
We won't have that. We will not have a Gilbert House Fellowship on that Sunday because we will still be down there. We encourage you, if you live in the area, please go to readynowexpo.com, readynowexpo.com, and register. It's free to attend in person.
Yep.
But they only have so many seats.
Yeah. So call in advance. The information is at the website readynowexpo.com, or you can also find the link at our website, gilberthouse.org. Look in the right-hand column for upcoming conferences. Go to our calendar section of our app under upcoming events. The schedule, as Sharon mentioned, is posted at readynowexpo.com. Look in the top menu bar for the link there. Vicki Joy Anderson will be speaking Thursday morning at 10. Then there'll be a couple of tapings of the Jim Bakker Show.
Yeah, those are always fun to watch.
Yep.
And be part of.
And then we will be speaking on...
we're on a show with Vicki Joy, and we're on a show with Carl.
Yes.
Carl Gallups. He's
right.
a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, we'll be on the taping on Friday morning with Vicki Joy, and then on Saturday, it looks like, with Carl. So that'll be great. We'll be speaking to Thursday afternoon at 2 p.m. on the, as we discussed earlier. Yeah, the live PAD radio. We're talking about the Gates of Hell, Destination Earth, and we'll be talking about a lot of H.P. Lovecraft.
Yep, many more things.
But anyway, a number of folks there. L.A. Marzulli will be delivering a video message. Vicki Joy Anderson, Dr. Dennis Lindsay, Pastor Carl Gallups, he will be there in person. Dave Robbins of End Time Ministries. Alan DiDio will be Skyping in. Donna Howell.
It stopped raining for a minute.
Joe
girls.
Artis Horn will be there in person.
Let's go outside. Come on. Grace.
Go on, Grace.
Oh, no, it is still raining up there.
Saying, I'm getting my belly rubbed. Why do I want to leave? More information at readynowexpo.com. And again, just sign up early. If you can't be there, you can also stream video. The streaming video is just $25. And again, that's at readynowexpo.com. June, the Mysteries of the Bibleverse Conference in Indianapolis. July, will be in the Dayton, Ohio area for the Go Therefore conference. And then in August, the Remnant Rising Conference from Hear the Watchmen. That'll be in Springfield, Missouri, right here in the Ozarks.
We are so excited about this. Just to close out, those of you who've been praying for Derek, we are very thankful for that. He's having a test run next week that may give us some answers, so pray for that.
Week after next.
Week after next, sorry.
Yeah, next week is going to be all busy with Carl all the time.
That is true. It is.
Carl Gallups will be here.
Gallups.
Yeah, we'll be with him Monday, again Tuesday, and then down there in Morningside. So, that is the deal. And again, if you want information about our 2025 Israel tour in October with special guest Carl Teichrieb, find that at gilberthouse.org/travel.
We know lots of Carls.
We do.
They're all great.
That is
Carl.
Yes.
And
speaking of Carl, and a lot of Dougs too.
Yeah.
Carl Teichrieb is the guest on tomorrow night's View from the Bunker, as we talk about his recent visit to Paganacon.
Oh, yeah, that's
a pagan gathering in Minneapolis, and also about the upcoming Israel tour, because Carl will be our guest.
I know Carl and his wife Leanne are wonderful people, and I know that you will want to get to know them even better. We want, by the way, speaking of View from the Bunker, you talked with me about possibly reducing the number of programs per month.
Yeah, just
you and I are getting older.
Yeah, recognizing that I'm not as young as I used to be, but also we're doing so many programs per week between Unraveling Revelation, the Bible's Greatest Mysteries, which has been sort of on hold for about a month or so. We've got some programs in the can that we just need to get edited and out. But with writing projects that we're trying to get done as well. Something's got to give. And because of the health challenges and the fact that I'm on a protocol to try to ramp up my immune system, my body is fighting something.
Yeah, you sleep 10 to 12 hours depending upon.
Right. I used to get by on 7 to 8. Now it's more like 9 to 11, sometimes 12. So the Iron and Myth series with Doug Van Dorn, Dr. Judd Burton, Brian Godawa, that will continue once a month. But there may be the rest of the View from the Bunker series may just be on a special basis, just to try to cut down the amount of hours per week that I'm sitting in front of a screen trying to edit video instead of resting or writing. So
and resting is big. I've been saying, learn how to say no, and you're getting better at it.
Yeah. Turned down a couple of interview opportunities this past week to be on other podcasts. And I know that's part of trying to let people know, hey, we got a new book out and this, that. I did agree to go on Coast to Coast AM again in May. But other than that, it's probably going to be few and far between as far as interviews. We're also doing a lot of sitting on a lot of panels, recording sessions at Skywatch TV of late.
Yeah.
They're trying to bank a lot of programs before the camping season starts, because once that starts, a lot of the staff at Skywatch TV will be out at Whispering Ponies Ranch.
Yeah.
So April, we've got I don't know, before the month is over, we'll have done 10 or 11 recording sessions in terms of number of programs. But
I need more hats.
Happy to do it. Yes.
Because of my eyes, the lights for the set, I just can't take them. So I have to wear a little hat. So I need more hats.
That's it. We wear enough as it is. So trying to take off one or two just to give us more time to heal up and just be ready for the things that we prioritize. So anyway, tomorrow morning, Gilbert House Fellowship Bible Study. We're back in the Old Testament. And until then, I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and for Grace and Glory, well, one is on the couch and the other one is playing tug of war with me. Bye-bye, everybody.
PID Radio is produced by Gilbert House and released under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Follow us online, Twitter @PID Radio, or the PID Radio page at Facebook. Join us each week for our online Bible study, the Gilbert House Fellowship, online at gilberthouse.org.